Yes, I'm rich in my joy, in my flow, in my yes, I'm rich. I don't chase validation, nah, that's so.
I do freelance, so I help out small businesses and nonprofits seeking grants, but also making sure that they have the back end office to handle when they come to someone like you, make sure they have their audit ready in a sense. So their bookkeeping is ready, all the essentials are prepared to make sure you can either get TPA ready or next step of investments and grants.
I'm Alaka Hobby, and I'm standing in for Jen West today. She's the owner of Wild Fig Commercial Lending. I work with her there. A lot of my knowledge lies on the DSCR side, so a great way to offset your 1099 income is through investment properties. So that comes up organically. If you want to discuss afterwards, please let me know. Wild Fig Commercial Lending is a great addition to your team, which is one of the most important parts to small business.
Easy will come. They are disqualified just as quickly as they may have worked 4 hours on the application, but if the details are not correct of what they're asking for, it's not going to be worth it at the end of the day of the grant. But yeah, I always say this at the same time, like make sure the hours are worth it that you're putting into the grant just as much, because if you're not reading it, it's one big word problem at the end of the day.
I've had a client use an attorney, but not the right attorney who had their best interest or the best knowledge in mind, and they paid that attorney a lot of money to set up complicated, multi-level, complex trusts to hold all of their things, which in the end just made them ineligible for a lot of financing products.
Yeah, understand the eligibility provisions, and because that could flag you, and then now you're disqualified.
Yeah, we ended up just undoing all of it. Yeah.
Well, for entrepreneurs who may not feel like they're in a financial position to hire a lawyer, how can they work with a lawyer in a way that is budget conscious but still proactive?
A lot of times, it's not, you're not going to pay. I try to, if I'm talking to the owner, let's see what we're doing first, and we may want to take it on maybe an hourly basis instead of paying, a big flat rate and what that comes into. Sometimes it's just, let's just go through whatever the contract or the grant agreement, what that says, and maybe that's just one little flat rate where we're not just constantly the clock's running. So it's really case by case. I don't want to blanket, one way or the other, because I've worked on bigger deals that take up a lot more time, and you got to be a little bit cost-minded for your startups, because they're strapped already. I mean, they're looking for more capital. And capital is a good thing. It accelerates your business. It expands it. It helps you grow. Understanding what that looks like, I always say, let's just work together to find something. I always give like an estimate, and I want to keep it under that estimate. I don't want it to go over. So,
I would try to say this as gently as possible, and that is, you wouldn't consider buying a vehicle if you couldn't afford to put gas in it, buy insurance, and maintain it. It wouldn't be a prudent thing to do. So it's kind of, you're looking at starting a business, you have to kind of count the cost. What is the cost of doing business? And I would say legal counsel and financial, that's just the cost of doing business if you're wise. In my neighborhood, I could close my eyes and walk across the street and probably not get hit by a car. But if I do it a lot, I'm gonna get hit by a car eventually. So I think that's part of it. And so how do you figure out how to afford it? I think in each community, there's typically lawyers who are friendly to startup companies, and they understand that they're struggling and all that. And so I would say in the entrepreneurial community you're in, ask for references. Hey, I need an attorney. I need one that's friendly. I can't afford this, X, Y, Z. But in the end, I think, hey, it's kind of, you're setting yourself up for a really bad event down the road, and all that work you put into building your business could all be for naught because you saved, I don't know, $2,000 or $3,000. You thought you saved it.
Correct.
So speaking of funding, what factors do all viewers need to take into consideration when you decide between a loan, taking on debt, giving up the equity, and what factors would dictate whether either of those is an option? So as we're talking about funding the business and having the legal backing and making sure that's all in place, what decisions kind of go into what type of funding you look for?
I guess it depends on what you're forecasting, what you're wanting to do. You know, are you needing that capital to bring on more help, or more tech, or more space? It's really a kind of a sorted, you know, what are you needing at that point in time? Are you needing to bring more investors on? You know, is it more of an investor agreement, trying to work it out between your new investor that's coming on board? So that's some of the things that's coming to mind in that instance.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's on a case-by-case basis. I think an investor in the short term seems easy, but it can cost you a lot in the long term as your business grows and the value of their equity grows. What I don't like to see is people who just, you know, you go to your bank that you're familiar with and you ask for financing and they look at everything and they say you're not financeable. So some people feel like that's going to be your only option is to bring in an outside investor. And a bank doesn't, most banks don't know about other programs. So instead of telling you no, I do wish that they would say, it's a no for us, but please look into other options. Like, for example, there's no doc loans, there's P&L loans. There's loans that are not going to look at the numbers that you're getting on your tax return, and they're going to look at, you know, after all your expenses and all that, and they can look at just what you've got incoming from your bank statements and offer some creative sources of funding that way.
Yeah, I would say don't be discouraged by your first denial. Okay, there's this market. It's up and coming, especially with all the different financing arrangements there are. You know, Dennis's group is one of them. You know, banks have the SBA program. They've got their capital program, and there's all different avenues. Network and ask around, because yeah, your traditional bank is what we always think of, but they may not be the ones because they've got their processes they have to follow, and that's it. That's all they know. So
I definitely think it's relationship based as well, because a lot of times the bank that you've been at for the longest is just because there's no actual guarantee that that's a good bank for your business. And that's another thing, like that relationship with somebody at the bank can make a difference of what the financing looks like too.
I think it also circles back to important to having, because the fintech options are emerging so rapidly, there's good options and there's some pretty scary options.
Yeah.
And so that's why having a good lawyer and really understanding what you're signing up for. One of my horror stories, and one of our borrowers is got into a tough situation, needed to borrow money, ended up borrowing the wrong kind of money online, and they don't express the interest rate very clearly. And so this woman was paying 66% interest rate on not a small amount of money, and so she was drowning. And so you got to know what the details are. So it's kind of cool that there are all these new options out because we need them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of predatory lenders out there, and you got to be careful.
That's true. I've seen a lot of people get into the merchant cash advance
Mhm.
arena
Yeah.
and it not go well for them. It's a product that can work in a very specific scenario, but really dangerous
Yeah.
for.
Can y'all speak a little bit more to those different type of fintech, especially the new ones that are a little bit more, I guess, dangerous, if that's the word, feel more like a scam? Like what would what would be,
kind of scammy.
scamming,
Yeah.
what would be the kind of keywords or key topics that would let people know that this is not the type of loan you want to be going after?
I mean, hard money is a good example of something that can be very dangerous, but also very good, and it all comes down to the terms of it, and again, having an attorney make sure that you understand the implications and what's the worst case scenario.
Right.
So hard money could be the best thing that happens to your business, and then it could be the worst thing.
I would say, does it feel rushed to you as well? You know, that particular person probably was feeling squeezed.
For sure.
And you know, when you're rushed, you're like, yeah, I'm just going to sign on the dotted line.
Right.
Loans at stake.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and there could be acceleration clauses, that interest rate. I how it's calculated, I mean, disastrous. So if it feels like this is going way too fast or too easy,
If it sounds too good to be
too
true,
good, yeah,
it's
yeah,
probably
that
not
should
true.
be a red flag, an alarm going off in your head that maybe I need to slow down, let someone, a professional kind of look at these terms, kind of being, cost, maybe just do like a red flag summary, not do a full negotiation, right? Just say, this, I see these are issues that we need to address, and let's talk about that before we sign.
And as an accountant, it pays to have the right people also, because those little things that you're paying for, it is a tax write-off, but it's the investment that's going to make for the long haul.
At what point would it make sense for people to contact you and do CDI?
Well, I mean, the vast majority of what we do is basic commercial lending, We have some flexibility because we're not regulated like a bank, but to be transparent, the majority of our capital that we're lending is coming from bank partners. So we still have a lot of the same underwriting restrictions that a typical commercial loan. So we have some latitude, but the majority of what we do is probably not going to be startup, what a bank would call unbankable. What does it mean to be unbankable? Well, for a bank, that means you don't have 2 years of profitability, a track record. So we have the latitude to use some of our own dollars to go into. We do a small amount of early stage lending and investing, but it's actually on our website. There's some videos, educational videos, and there's a few that I would recommend. There's a Financing My Business series that talks about there's a continuum of a business's life cycle and capital that matches that. When you're a startup, you're not bankable. The bank is not a source of capital for you. So typically in a startup business, it's bootstrapping, friends and family. You might attract a investor that's a friend of the family kind of thing. And then when you start talking about equity investors, now it's do you have a business type that's going to attract?
Right.
Which is typically going to be a high growth opportunity. Less than 1% of companies in America receive equity investment. So it's not like you couldn't get it, but you need to realize what kind of business am I growing? What stage is it at? What are those sources of capital? And now there's new emerging sources. So these ladies would be helpful in saying, okay, here's some creative things for early stage or startup businesses.
Well, y'all speak to some of those early stage options that are available with the grants and things like that. What are some of the ones that you see that are most successful for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I don't know too much about grants.
When it comes to grants, there are quite a bit that say in the stipulations that it is startup. And you don't need all of the paperwork just in spick and span order type of thing just yet. And they also tell you pretty much some of that investment is going to go towards that. And so those are things that are also in the details that you have to make sure that you're paying attention to, because if you mishandle that and your overhead costs are what's going to eat you later, they're like, oh, they'll say like that was part of the expectations or certain things. That so the communication of what they are wanting also has to be what you are seeking as well.
I rattled off a few earlier, the no-doc loans, the P&L loans, more creative things. A lot of banks will look at your global, and then if you know the right banks to go to, they're not going to look at your global, and they're just going to look at your business income. Some other more creative, but I would want to talk to you and know more about your business before I recommend them. Could be credit card stacking. That's something I personally used to purchase a few properties and renovate them last year. But again, the strategy has to be right, or it can also just be an interest situation.
Yeah. And there's also accelerators as well as like grant pitch competitions too, which is another thing that a lot are becoming more popular, I feel like now, than they were before. And those are also opportunities where you don't have to have everything ready, but as long as you have the idea and concept as clean as possible, you're ready to go on that element, then that's also a resource.
And we're going to have a pitch competition kind of tied into this entire program. So if you have a business that you want to pitch, we're going to help you build that and then do actually the pitch at the end, just to get experience in that world. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely let us know. And we're going to have to get the sign-ups will end on Friday. But our goal is for people to be better at pitch writing and making sure that you're positioned so that you get that opportunity.
I do have a quick, I don't know if it's a question or a statement related to some of the pitches, and if you're talking about financing, I do know one of the things to be mindful of when you're looking at the pitch competitions are which ones will write you a check and which ones are a reimbursement model. Because that, I've seen in the entrepreneurial community, people getting learned there, like there's a big one locally where they'll advertise 10,000. You have to spend that 10,000 to get it back. So that's another, like, if you're exploring pitch competitions, making sure you have some form of capital that you can invest yourself while you're waiting on a reimbursement.
Yeah. And kind of to feed off of that, a lot of grants aren't going to fund a brand new idea. It's also going to be something that's sustainable already without them. They want to make sure that the grant is almost like the cherry on top, not necessarily the full foundation of it as well.
Yeah, it's lean in those early days, and I always say there's no such thing as free money in the startup times, except maybe friends and family, you know. But a lot of times, sometimes the friends and family want a little cut of your company to work that out and to get paid on their investment. So, just speaking from personal experience, I've got a startup I'm a partner in, and we've been kind of very ground level of what are we looking at, trying to get some funding for the two that want to break out of where they are to get this off the ground. And it's been difficult. We went to traditional banking. Now I'm like, we're zero. It's like, no, they're not going to. I mean, we can talk to them all day long, but they're not going to, fund this. I'm like, let's look at what we're doing, with the friends and family, or the credit card stacking, or other options instead of that traditional route. So there's so many out there. You just got to know what kind of business you're trying to create, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, one thing about all of it is as long as your budget actually is written out and knowing where the money being delegated towards, you're stronger than most people coming into a lot of these places.
Yes, a good business plan and a forecast, a budget, and cushion your budget, that it's going to overrun, not run lean or it's going to hit everything. Cushion it to where it's going to be a little bit more than what you were expecting. Inflation, tariffs, all the things, yes.
Personally, I talked to you earlier about a business I started. It's a small native plant-focused residential landscape design firm, and I have a strong business plan, and it does, in some way collateralize my house. But I took out a HELOC on my home, and I've been using that to fund my business, and I have a strict outlined repayment plan. But so one of the more risky things, but if you have a home with equity in it, it's another source of capital where yourself is the capital. Go ahead.
What advice would you all give for someone looking to be an investor?
Do it. Do it. There's a lot of good resources around town. I actually lead the Southeast Women in Real Estate Investing meetup, so if you want to come by sometime, but definitely do it. I guess the best advice I would give would be just to get advice from people who have done it, and then talk to someone who can give you the best idea on strategy. For me, it was house hacking. I lived in the house. I bought it as a primary. I lived in it for 2 years while renovating it, created equity, started renting it, did it again to the next one, and moved around until I got to a place where I could actually just live in a house that was finished and still buy investment properties. So happy to chat with you more about that.
Yeah. But also investing in other people's businesses as a backer or a hard money loan in those instances.
Well, yeah, it goes to the terms. I mean, do you want ROI? You want investment? You want some interest on top of what you put in, or how you want to get paid back? How long do you want to hold that? Is there more of a longer term? You kind of look at you got to see what's the widget, right? Real estate, you can see it, you can stand on it. More tangible things, or even tech, it's harder to project. So it's, what's your risk factor as well? You know, I mean, what position are you in? Long-term, short-term, you know, and even how much capital you want to put into this?
I would try to find some experienced peers
Yeah.
to learn. Okay, let's.
So, go ahead.
So business can be a product, making clothes or furniture or something, but it can be a software, and we are living in the AI world. So in terms of loans and investment, do you have any advice depending on if it's a business is a software or a physical product, what type of loan and what would be a
Software companies are very difficult to finance because they don't, lenders, traditional lenders, the majority of lenders, they want to have some sort of hard asset collateral that they could liquidate if the loan went bad. That doesn't make them bad people, it's just the fact of doing business, right? If you look at a bank's net margin, average bank 2 to 3% after all said and done. Well, you can do the math. It doesn't take many loans to go bad before that bank's out of business, right?
Right.
So that's why they're regulated and the margins are very thin. So they're going to want to see hard assets. So any kind of service business, even a well-established lawyer, they're going to end up probably having to pledge strong personal assets and stuff like that if they want to get a traditional commercial loan. So on the software side, the beautiful side about software companies is, you know, gross margins are high, cost of goods sold is very low. If you can get traction, man, it's great, but it's tough to finance that growth because you gotta go non-traditional, or you gotta figure out how to attract some sort of equity investment.
And then a lot of times with grants or even accelerators, they have proof of concept a lot of times for going in, but also find ones that are already focused on tech related aspects. So they will show that there's people they've given that money to in the past.
Where do you find clients and how do you figure out if they're even worth applying for, depending on your business model?
So
You find a good grant.
yeah.
Actually, I'm gonna give a commercial for that. The grant world is so complex and so hard to navigate. I gotta believe if I wanted to go into someone who specializes in that, would be the first thing.
Yeah, because there are softwares out there, but if you also don't know what you're looking for in a grantor, and you don't have the full concept of what you are getting the investment for, that's going to be the other hard aspect of like what you're searching for. But there are platforms like Hello Alice, Hello Skip, Grant Gopher. Like there's so many softwares out there, but some of them focus on nonprofit, some of them focus on for-profit. So that's another thing to look into. Like there's one I absolutely love. It's called Instrumental, but that one's very much focused on nonprofits. You're not gonna find any for-profits on there, and they will literally tell you, nope, this is not even the direction that you should. You're in the wrong place. So that is one thing. But there's a lot of tools, but also if you don't know how to use the tool, it won't be worth it because there are subscriptions for those as well. Yeah.
Quick question about that. So I'm therapist 20 years, terrible at billing for what I'm supposed to. It's not gonna change. I really try. So I'm kind of at the precipice of I call myself a social entrepreneur because I'm donating part of my proceeds to a charity, but do I take the full jump? I'm looking at where am I now? Should I become a nonprofit? Because really I'm funding a lot of it out of my own home and so forth. That's not great. My husband would prefer not. So do I go that route? Is it worth it? Is the funding worth it? Or do I stay in this route? And I know that's a big question, but like how do you find, I know I can, yes, well, I would love to talk to you, but like that's kind of where I'm at. Like not where is the easier, better money, but where is the easier, better money?
So I will start with, are you prepared for the paperwork when it comes to nonprofits? If you are doing it by yourself, that is a lot. Making sure that you are compliant for everything. You're in quarterly, all the concepts for that. If you're not ready for that, I would say go in kind donation. realize that you are already doing it, and just really, it's just changing that invoice around to say that you're donating that time, in a sense. That could be a better option, tax write-off.
Yeah, because I'm not a detailed person. That's not my strength. That sounds like death. Thank you.
I do just want to give a thumbs up to Hello Alice and Hello Skip both. Hello Alice has got a number of phone calls with me, just as explorative and like great feedback, so I think they're wonderful. And I actually won a $10,000 Skip grant.
That, I will say, I feel like I remember that, yeah.
It's like, I'm still not sure why or how, right? But it's one of those things that I tell people all the time, fill them out, like, spend some time. When you have extra time and you don't know what you're supposed to be doing in a minute, or you have 5 extra minutes, get on one of those platforms. Skip is my.
Oh yeah, Skip, I will always advocate for Skip, because there's a lot of AI features embedded into it. But the best part about Hello Skip is there's a feature where every grant has very much generic questions.
It's like a whole.
Yeah, and so they have that space where you put those generic questions in, and so you never have to fill out those pieces again. And so you have to then you can focus on the real meat of the grant, and then they also will save all your answers. And so a lot of times you have to go to the actual website to fill it out. So you can literally copy paste and go from that route. So I always say Hello Skip also has a lot of, not just AI features, but it has tools in there to tell you if your answer is weak or if it's strong. So that's another reason why I'm a fan. What was it again?
The question is being around, I'm a for-profit business, so, yeah, I love all the nonprofit, but I'm like,
Yeah.
so like, I just didn't know you could get grants for for-profit.
Absolutely.
Honestly, so.
Yeah. I actually had a grant from local entrepreneur center for myself a couple of years ago. I won $5,000 doing the accelerator. So it was 5 weeks for $5,000. Now that one is 5 weeks for $10,000. Now I'm like, I wish I would have waited. But so it is little things out there that for the for-profits, there's definitely people who want you to win. You just have to see where that money is.
So what are some of the grants that you know of that are specifically for profit, other than the one you just mentioned with Casey? Are there other ones that are?
Yeah, so there's Empower Her. They have monthly, they are giving back $1,000 for for-profit women owners. And there's also Hello Skip. They literally do $1,000 every other week, I believe they give away. And that is literally as long as you are on their YouTube at 3 o'clock. You get a code after you do the application process and hit submit. You have a code for all of that. So there's quite a few out there that are constant, and that's the other part where grants will tell you they're giving that money away, and if you go to a site that's telling you $15, it could be true, but also the fact of like there's some that you pay for, but make sure that they're worth it because there's scams everywhere, and make sure that they're credited for that money is being given in the past, and not just a reimbursement or something else. Like look into them. The research is true.
Locally, there's an organization called The Women, and they have a pitch competition every year. And so you apply to be a part of a cohort. There's like a training, and they select maybe like 4 or 5 of us. I was over 6 years ago. So first place was $7,500, and second place was $35. So they do that annually for local female businesses within the city council. It's called The Women.
And I do have a list of more that I
Yeah,
if you're interested in more action, lists.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
You want to, we can share.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that'd be great. So we're talking about the great ways to get money. Let's talk about some of the, there's TikToks and Reels out there saying there's all this free money. What are some of the worst ones or most dangerous pieces of information you've seen or heard of in those spaces?
I hear the one gentleman wanted to start a business because he saw something on TikTok or Instagram about creating a trust, and it kind of lost me because I was like, what do you, you have to do all these other steps and create an LLC, and his was just like some online advice thing. It was so convoluted. I was like, what you need to do is, I just started, I was like, what is your business plan? Share that with me. Have you started that? Instead of just getting something off social media and then calling me saying you want to create this LLC and this trust. put this into this, and I was like, oh, how are you doing all that? And he had no idea. It was so, I was like, you come back to me with that, then we'll talk. So that, I don't know if that's floating up, whatever that is, but that's one where I was just like, it was completely from social media that he was getting advice from.
It's, I hear stories all the time. I want to do this, and I'm like, tell me more.
Yeah.
Again, it's like you want the funding, but you're not really looking at the behind or the time it takes to get there. So, if y'all seen some of those too in the grant space and the funding, commercial lending?
Yes. Also, every grant is not, you cannot copy and paste an answer. And every grant is made for a niche in a sense. When everybody tells you the niche down, they were telling you for grants. That is the reason why. Because if you don't know the focus, there's not one big grant tour that's going to guarantee money ever. And there's no guarantee in grants for sure. And I think that's another part that's a strong myth right now. Because I think last year I applied for almost over 200 in some grants, and I heard back from 11. And so like, and that's even just communication. Like sometimes they get a lot of just applications and you'll never hear back from them. So that's another thing that, but yeah, there's no free money out there. And I think that's a lot easier said than done. But there's a lot of scams that's gonna get you before you realize that.
And the other topic is crowdfunding as a way to start taking money or get the debt upfront money to start a business. What are y'all's thoughts and experience with those?
With what money? I'm sorry.
Crowdfunding. Sorry.
I've only dealt with it in a capacity of nonprofit is really fundraising in a sense, but we did really strong in the crowd aspect. So it was around Dance and Cheer Showcase. And so they had intentions for giving a scholarship. And so it was very much, we knew where the money was going, and intentionally marketing for it. And I think that's the best part of crowdfunding is if you aren't ready to market and like a full marketing team behind it, it's going to be harder to crowdfund. Because it is a lot, you have to get in a lot of people's faces to make sure that you can even just get that spiel off.
I guess the cost is probably high to sell it, you know, to get enough people to fund where you need to be. And then what are you giving up? What do you just asking for money? Yeah, give something back out. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a platform called I Fund Women, and it's focused on crowdfunding, but they have a lot of resources on there in regards of like how to prepare for it. And so like the grant pitch is one thing I do, but it's similar to a full PowerPoint presentation of what the investors are going to seek and what they're getting. So that's usually crowdfunding, like that's where it starts, is that presentation.
Okay. So what are some funding sources that you see entrepreneurs missing most often and or just not aware of in general?
What are they missing? I don't know that they're really missing. I think it's just they're struggling with how to understand the different sources and how to navigate that. And that's where I think things like the Small Business Development Centers, KEC, a good lawyer, those are gonna be, hey, help you figure out where are you on that continuum, what's the appropriate size. So I don't see them missing a lot of appropriate ones. I see most people struggling with, I'm not sure which one fits, and or how do I go about that. I don't know that there's a specific question about this topic, but I don't want to go by without being said. Having really clear, well done financials is so important. There's a saying that accounting is the language of business, but finance is the story. Your finances tell the story of your business, and you want to tell a good story. So if you don't have finances, you don't have a story. If you have bad finances, you have an unappealing story to a lender or an investor. So that's both historic and forward-looking pro forma financials. It's you gotta have it. Anybody who will give you money without that, I would be very weary of, unless it's a hard money loan with you're collateralizing a hard asset. So they still probably want to see that. But anyway, I'm sorry, I did want to say that
No, I
because it's
think
so
it's,
important.
yeah, it's perfect, thank you.
No, and I'm glad you said that. It was a point that I wanted to touch on is how important the story is. Often with the brokerage clients, I have people sign a non-compete where they're only going to work with me. Because if another broker was to take your business financials and take them to bank A and just hand them over, it's a no. But if I can get your financials and I can look at them and I can ask you some questions and get more information and figure out your story and help paint the picture that might not be obvious just based off of those financials that may not look great, I can get a yes also from bank A. But not if someone has already just sent it all their way before me. So yeah, story in banking is, you think banking is just black and white, approved, disapproved. There's a lot of just story behind it.
So I'm going to tag on to that.
Keep going.
Relationship. Don't have your first interaction with your banker be you asking for money.
Yeah.
You want your banker to know you, right? So you've been at this bank for X years. They've seen your deposits go in there. They know you as a human, and then you have financials that tell a good story. Bankers everybody likes to say their decisions were very analytical. Every decision is emotional. We use analytics to support our decisions.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if you're a real human with a real story, with real history of that bank, you've got a way better chance of getting a loan from them, or at least a real warm connection to a better source of capital.
Yes.
If your banker is connecting you with a creative financing, that's gonna speak a lot to the other source of capital.
Definitely.
So
Story, I was gonna say, story clearly goes into grants as well, so it's all across the board is necessary.
Yeah, and I'll also ask, look at yourself too, of like what assets, what your network is, and the relationships you have, because there could be a lot of support there that you may not be aware of. I'm a little over 2 years. When I, hang a shingle, I was coming out of a financial institution. I wasn't coming from a firm, so I didn't have clients coming over immediately. But I established a network that I felt that I was confident to bet on myself. And I looked at, and I'm just telling you, like my entrepreneur story is we had equity in our home, and I've used that as a business loan to my firm. So I get tax incentives on my business, but I've got that loan that's on the books that I use to start up to get the things in place. And one of the first things I got a hold of was a bookkeeper, because I've clients, court, closings, and it's the billing and everything else. You're wearing all the hats, and at least there's going to be a time where, as you're scaling, you're going to have to hand off this stuff. And the bookkeeper was my first source just to get me straight come tax time, and now when it comes back, I'm like, oh wow, the federal government doesn't want you to fail. It really doesn't. As an entrepreneur, the tax code it incentivizes entrepreneurs. You just got to understand the sources, what you have available, and use it to your advantage. And you can succeed a lot more than you can fail.
What other resources and training do you have that you'd recommend for business entrepreneurs to utilize as they build their business? Obviously this is great because again, I do feel your story, what you're telling, your passion is why you're in the business, and then having a bookkeeper, having other people here alongside you to help you really support that is very important. Are there other resources that y'all would recommend other than just a team of people that know your story and want to support you in that way?
Wild Fit Commercial Lending, sorry. We do offer an introductory course into different loan types and available fundings for investors and small business owners. And Jen's also currently working on a cohort fractional CFO, which would be taking a small group of individual business owners and doing, I believe, a 10-week program to help them fund their business and structure their business
Yeah, accounting is probably the first best, most efficient thing to quote outsource as a, because the accounting standards are very clear, right? The GAAP rules and stuff like that are very clear. And on one of those videos on our website is an introduction to accounting, and people love it. It's an hour, 10 minutes long. It gives you just the basic ability to then talk to an accountant and stuff like that. So I'll
To tag on, we're talking about kind of advocating for yourself and finding the right banking partner. The same goes for finding the right bookkeeping and CPA. I've never had to advocate for my business more than when I was trying to find a CPA when I first started. Because, it's a service-based business. So I would come and they're like, no, you need a bookkeeper. I'm like, no, I need a CPA. I can do everything else. I need a CPA. They're like, but you're too small. So I kind of had a thing with the bookkeepers were like, we don't need you. The CPA said, you're too small for us. But I was like, no, train's moving forward. You're on it or you're off. So I eventually found someone who I think kind of, you are saying, like someone who's willing to invest in a small business. And I've now been with my CPA for 7 years. So, yeah. That's like, it's like my CPA and my financial planner are the first two people. And the questions are, am I broke? Can I retire?
No and no.
Your answer to one was the answer to the other. I'm going tomorrow.
No exit strategy.
I'm so sorry if your website goes dark. I'm in St. Thomas, baby.
So, last question before we can kind of go to Q&A, which I appreciate y'all throwing questions out there. That's been fabulous. What's the biggest takeaway you want the attendees to get from this panel?
There's more than one way to find funding. And also that there's people here in local that want to see you thrive as well.
Don't think there's a shortcut.
I'd say don't look just as capital as funding. It can be leverage as well. Use that to your advantage when you're going out in the world and trying to find that capital. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to negotiate. And believe in yourself and believe whatever it is that you're wanting to start. Whether it's tangible or intangible, like I said, you're an entrepreneur, you had that itch that needed to be scratched, and you're betting on yourself. And if you bet on yourself, you're less likely to fail. So just use that when you're going out there and looking for that capital.
Yeah.
Leverage it.
Don't get discouraged. As entrepreneurs, I'm sure before starting your business, tons of people were like, don't do it, stay at your W-2, it's not safe. And we all disregarded those no's. So think of no's from banks as the same thing, more of a, I'm gonna prove you wrong kind of situation.
I mean, banks and credit unions are different. Credit union is a nonprofit. And that is another resource I feel like we don't use enough.
And usually if it's a small credit union, you can have a better relationship. And I think a lot of what we're talking about here is relationship. Making sure you have a team that you can contact, somebody you can call and ask questions, whether it's a peer in the area you want to grow in, or if it's a professional who is really kind of special in what they're doing for you, whether it's legal or funding, whatever it may be, but making sure you have that relationship and you've communicated your desire.
Yeah, and those relationships, I want to add kind of the last question too, is that's a good learning resource, is that others that are doing it, talk to them, ask them questions. I mean, and ask the bad days more than the good days, and what they do on those bad days.
Credit unions are a great resource. They're much more likely to give you a character loan, which is just like a, hey, we know you, we give you a better rate, you get better service, better everything. If they're familiar with you, familiar with your brand, the same people they know, they see you at networking events. This is just something that small credit unions will do with people they're familiar with, the businesses they do.
Questions?
We talked a lot about startup capital and cash and those kinds of things. We're older, we're 8 years old, we're in millions of billings every year. We're looking at being acquired. Any advice or thoughts? Because we're talking to 2 potential buyers, they found us, we're new to this. So looking for any beginner advice for being acquired.
Find a great transactional team early. Yeah.
Who all needs to be on that team?
Well, there's people who specialize in helping companies sell their
Okay,
businesses.
are you talking more like a broker team?
Yeah, something like that, you know, an investment bank or somebody, there's different types out there, but they are, you know, if you're looking at being acquired, is it another company or is it a private equity or?
2 different, private equity right now. They're 2 different companies in our industry.
Okay. So,
They're buying our book of business.
yeah, so the good news is you said you had 2, right? So
Yeah.
the very first thing a good broker is going to do is try to create competition. You know, before even that, it gets back to they're going to look at your financials to say, is your company in good condition to be sold? There's over $1 trillion of wealth tied up in baby boomer-owned companies in America. 80% of them don't have an exit strategy. Most of those companies are going to require 2 to 3 years of work to be ready to be sold because their books are so bad. There's so many personal, you know, expenses, which is totally legal and fine to do. But you got to unwind all that and restate those financials to maximize how much you get for your company. And people who sell businesses do that every day. And the people who buy businesses do it every day. It's kind of like going to the car dealer. You know, you lose that negotiation. They do that every day. You do it once every 5-10 years, right? So you need somebody who knows how to do that.
Business valuation, and know somebody, like know the value of your business and have it professionally evaluated. And what is, you know, your future earnings and what would you, if you kept in the business, what would you earn and how much do you want to pull back in when you sell the business?
Yeah.
Present, future earnings. What do the terms look like? First, you know, get a good NDA in place, and you know, if they're asking for everyone to stay on, is there an owner retention type requirement they're wanting to put in there? Does the owner want to continue to stay?
How much is cash? How much is earnout? You know, there's just so much.
I know, this is why it's intimidating, is like
Yeah.
we weren't looking for this and they both came to us kind of at the same time, so it's like, what are these terms? Like, I'm turning to Gemini and being like, on the phone with these people, like, what are they talking about, like, trying to define all this, and that's where I realized that we're out of our depth.
Well, and first is evaluate. What is your company worth? That's kind of your starter right there.
Yeah.
And then from there, yeah, getting a broker, an attorney, kind of start looking at these 2. I mean, you got 2 prom dates right here, right?
I need dress.
You need a dress.
Make sure it's worth it.
To get to the big dance. So, you know, so that's why you've got to listen to both of them and make sure it's what, you know, the owner, the executive team, and then the rest of the employees. Care about your employees. What are they in it for?
Yeah.
Or what does that look like long term?
And this is something I've learned from seeing this transition in the past. If you do end up getting ready to sell, make sure your employees know that there's some kind of bonus or something like that for them to stay on until the transition occurs. Because if it doesn't occur and they think it's going to, they may leave thinking, I don't want to be a part of the new team. And then if the sale doesn't happen, then you're left kind of holding the bag without your team in place. So just things like that, little details that can really protect you as the transition is in process and until it's completed. So.
And there's a big difference between, it sounds like what you have would be considered a strategic buyer, another company that's going to get more than just the economic value. If you do a pure, what's my business worth, that's likely going to be an economic calculation of, I've got this much EBITDA, this industry gives this kind of a multiple. But if you're getting bought by someone, there's a strategic advantage, the multiple should be higher, okay? Again, those are the kinds of things that you need help with, right?
Yeah, and you know, your customers, your clients, your book of business, what does that look like too? Does it presently, and then what, if a buyer comes on, what's it gonna look like? What is your relationships with your clients and your customers gonna do too?
Yeah.
And then
We have been able to keep the transition of power language out of the MSAs that we've signed, so that's helpful. Because there are these big companies will ask you to get permission from them to do everything, and it's insane.
Yeah.
So we luckily have a lawyer that pointed it out to us early, so most of our master services agreements don't have. But that's a service-based thing, the MSA. But yeah, it's crazy. You gotta dig through all those and figure out what the problems are, where the devil is in those details.
Right.
Yeah.
I would also say, my family business, we saw that at one point. My mom was like so eager, but that was almost like the runway for her to get ready for that moment instead of necessarily getting actually, this is that moment to happen. So don't necessarily say like take advantage of like just because the number makes it sound good. Be prepared that maybe next year even better number could come.
That's what I'm wondering, because we aren't even trying
Yeah.
right now, like,
Right.
I kind of want to put on the brakes, I have a partner, I kind of want to put on the brakes, because I'm like, okay, but what if we gave ourselves a year to increase the EBITDA and to increase the billings, because then once you get above $1 billion and EBITDA level, then your multiplier goes up just even economically,
Right.
not even strategically. So there's those conversations, and then if you did engage a broker, how many buyers would they bring, and how do you get into this
Right.
bidding thing?
Was your partner on the same page with you?
Yeah, she is. She was looking more, she's an academic by background, so she's a PhD, worked in academia, so she's much more risk averse than I am. So, but obviously risky enough to start what we started, bootstrap 8 years ago, so like not completely risk averse. So, but she is, I mean, I think she knows I'm a business head, and so she, it helps that we have such a professional, that's what you say.
Any other questions? Well, thank you all for coming. Just wanted to, obviously there's food and snacks up there if you wanted. Catherine wanted me to remind you about the happy hour at Mother Bar this Thursday. It'll be kind of the same conversation, but just a laid back, more general conversation. Everybody is welcome. We'd love to have you. If you want to be part of the pitch cohort, then applications are due by this Friday. And then the fireside check guest for April will be Katie Baker of Green Llama for the entrepreneurial session, and then Carol Siemens of Spark Innovation Center at UT Research as an angel investor for the investiture session. So that'll be for our next session if y'all want to make sure you register for those. So, but thank y'all so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate it.